If you're planning for retirement, chances are you want two things at the same time. You want income that you can outlive, and at the same time, you probably want to leave something behind. You want to leave money for your kids or your grandkids or causes that you care about. In other words, you want to have your cake and you want to eat it too. Perfectly reasonable. Today's topic comes out of new research from Morningstar, where a panel of retirement experts stress tested 9 different ways to create sustainable income from a portfolio. And what's interesting is this. 3 of those strategies stood out because portfolios that they modeled produced lifetime income and they ended retirement with more money than they started with. So today I'm going to walk you through each of those 3 strategies. We're going to rank them by ending portfolio size, and then we'll talk through the pros and cons of each while looking at what starting withdrawal rates gave retirees the highest likelihood of leaving assets behind. And there's one bigger question underneath all of this. If we focus on building the perfect plan to leave money behind after we're gone, are we unintentionally perpetuating a multi-generational mistake that tends to show up specifically with super savers? Now, I've had hundreds of these types of conversations, and I'll fill you in about what I've learned at the end of the video. If you're new to the channel, I'm your humble host, Benjamin Brandt. I've been a financial advisor for almost 20 years, and I want to help make your retirement even better. So the research comes to us from an article by Amy Arnott at Morningstar, and in that research, a team of retirement experts examined 9 different retirement withdrawal strategies, many of which allow for higher withdrawal rates than the classic 4% rule. The key point that the author makes right away, and I agree, is that there is no single best strategy for retirement planning, right? Every approach has trade-offs, pros and cons. Some favor simplicity, some allow for higher spending early on, and some prioritize for what's left behind. Now, this article specifically focuses on that last goal, maximizing the amount of money left over at the end of your retirement for you to leave to your beneficiaries. So to model this, they started with a $1 million portfolio, invested 40% in stocks and 60% in bonds over a 30-year retirement. Now, I should point out that's a little different than the allocation we usually talk about, which is 60-40, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. This is flipped around. And they tested 1,000 hypothetical market paths and only included withdrawal rates that succeeded at least 90% of the time. So a very strong likelihood of success for all these plans. From there, they focused on the median ending balance, which is what was left after 30 years. And 3 strategies stood out. The first strategy is what Morningstar calls the base case strategy. So this starts with a 3.9% withdrawal rate, which sounds pretty familiar if you're used to retirement planning. 3.9% withdrawal rate based on an initial $1 million portfolio. After that, withdrawals are adjusted for inflation every year, so spending stays flat in real terms. And this part matters. Spending does not increase really no matter what, no matter if the markets perform really well or not. Because this approach is so conservative, it produced the highest ending balance of any of the strategies that they tested. So the median ending portfolio balance after 30 years was $1.42 million, starting again with $1 million. So starting with $1 million, 30 years of income, this strategy, the median result was $1.42 million at the end. The article's author points out this creates very predictable cash flow, essentially a steady inflation-adjusted paycheck every year, and that's going to leave substantial assets behind. Those leftover assets can go towards your beneficiaries, but they can also serve as an important contingency plan for late life costs like long-term care. The trade-offs for a plan like this are lifetime spending is relatively low. The starting withdrawal rate is pretty modest. It's even less than the 4% rule that we talk about all the time. The strategy is just very inflexible. You don't get rewarded with higher spending if we have really good market returns. The second strategy builds on declining spending over time. So here withdrawals start a little higher, about 5% of the initial $1 million, but spending declines by 2% per year in real terms throughout retirement. That means negative 2% per year plus inflation. Now, with this approach, the median ending portfolio balance came in at $1.34 million after 30 years, so slightly lower than the base case, but still a pretty substantial ending portfolio value, especially given the higher starting rate of withdrawals, close to that 5%. So the advantage here is more generous spending early on in retirement, combined with predictable gradual declines later on. The downside is that spending can become pretty lean later in life. And that might not appeal to retirees who want to stay healthy and want to keep traveling or spending actively. And again, this is a preset path, very little flexibility. We've got to stick to the terms at the beginning of our retirement. The third strategy is called forgoing inflation adjustments after portfolio loss. This approach starts a bit higher than the base case at a starting withdrawal rate of 4.3%. But if a portfolio declines in a given year, that retiree skips the inflation increase the following year. So those skipped increases permanently lower future spending. Even though these inflation-based spending cuts are small, they are cumulative. So starting with the same $1 million balance, this strategy ended with a median of $1.28 million after 30 years. The benefit here is modest, predictable spending adjustments and strong asset preservation. The cost is lower lifetime spending with the potential of pretty tight budget later on in retirement. Now let's look at these strategies side by side. You could pause the video to look at this graphic. So as you can see, all three of these strategies work. They're very conservative plans. All three create retirement income that you're very unlikely to outlive. The real difference is how you pay for that ending balance, right? Plan 1 leaves the most behind, but it does that by keeping your spending very tight. Plan 2 gives you more early, but assumes that you'll want less income later. And Plan 3 makes small cuts at not so good times in the market, but those cuts can compound over time. All three plans solve for the stated objective of lifetime sustainable spending plus an ending portfolio value in excess of our starting portfolio value. But like anything else in life or in investing, there are trade-offs, right? Maximizing what's left behind at the end means you're spending less while you're alive. All three approaches rank on the lower end of lifetime spending, and they're relatively inflexible compared to strategies like retirement income guardrails that adjust more actively based on your portfolio performance. And by the way, if you want to learn more about retirement planning, including articles like the ones that we're discussing today, you should check out my newsletter, This Week in Retirement, where I find the best retirement content on the internet, and I zap it to your inbox every Thursday morning. So check us out at thisweekinretirement.com. Now, pulling back for just a minute, I feel the need to play the devil's advocate a bit here, and I want to make sure that we're not unintentionally perpetuating a multi-generational mistake that super savers often find themselves making. I've sat in many meetings with couples in their 60s whose parents are in maybe their 80s or 90s, and more than once I've heard some version of the following, which is, I wish my mom would spend some of this money, right? She's just going to leave it to me and I don't necessarily need it, because maybe mom's entering a nursing home and just the end feels near, and there's a large amount of money, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting there that she didn't manage to spend. And the adult kids will tell me, we begged mom to spend this money when she was younger. You should travel more. You should enjoy this money that you worked so hard for, but for whatever reason, she just couldn't bring herself to do it, and now it's going to go to the beneficiaries. And while these clients are talking about their parents, they're also really projecting. They're quietly saying, this is not what I want to have happen to me. Another pattern that I've noticed is that super savers tend to raise super savers, although sometimes it does skip a generation. But often when you're 90 and you're leaving somebody, let's say $200,000, leaving that money to somebody that's 60, yes, it's a wonderful gift and every gift is a blessing. But many times the person that is receiving that gift is already at retirement age and already financially independent. Remember, super savers tend to raise super savers. So then we ask a difficult question, how could we reshuffle this deck? And I'll often ask a super saver client that is already financially independent, was there a time in your life when a much smaller amount of money sooner, let's say $5,000 or $10,000, would that have been a game changer in your financial life? And almost without fail, they say, absolutely, yes, it would be. When my wife and I were just freshly out of college, we were dirt poor, right? When we had kids, the cost of daycare was crushing us. When I couldn't afford the health insurance that my job offered, we went a whole year without health insurance. Or we found the perfect house, but it was just out of reach financially. We just did not have enough money. So thinking through the best way to leave money behind is a great academic exercise. And some of the strategies we talked about today from Morningstar will absolutely work for the right person. But from where I'm sitting, having had these conversations many times with clients, I'd encourage you to also think about the following. By the way, if you want to dive deep into some of these ideas that I'm discussing, I'd highly recommend a book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. And the idea is that smaller gifts given sooner can be far more impactful than larger gifts given later, especially if the person that you're leaving money to after your death is likely to be financially independent by the time that they inherit the money. The same thing is true for charities. If you've ever worked for a nonprofit or served on a board, they need the money now. Even a smaller amount of money today can be significantly more impactful than a large amount of money decades in the future. And the best part about giving smaller amounts of money sooner is that you get to enjoy them enjoying the gift. So yes, absolutely save responsibly, be thoughtful, leave money behind at your death if that's what aligns with your values. But also ask yourself, is there any way that you could build your confidence into spending more money sooner, right? Could you give a little earlier, even if it's a smaller amount of money? Could you turn future generosity into present impact? That's really the balance that I think we're trying to strike in our retirement planning. And if you want help finding this balance in your own retirement plan, well, you might be interested in our Retire Ready Blueprint, and you can learn more in the video description. So that's it for today's video. I'm Ben. I hope this video helps to make your retirement even better, and I'll see you on the next one.